Welcome, everyone, to the Union College Archives podcast. I'm your host for today, Diane, and I will also be your narrator for today's short story. I was actually looking through a couple of old Union commuters, student newspapers that were published at UC during the 60s, and I found this lovely piece written by Warren Cant, an alumni of what was Union Junior College at the time. To give you all some context, during the Vietnam War in the 60s, while there were many different perspectives surrounding the conflict happening beyond our borders, many students at Union Junior College, with their anti-war stances, took it upon themselves to voice their beliefs and views through student protests and other more creative alternatives. This story is just a glimpse of all that was pushed in the student newspapers and the sheaf during this time. Notably, an amazing story written to shift perspectives of who were really paying the cost of this war. Now, on to the story. The Formula by Warren Cant. The mortar shells crackled through the air, tearing up the virgin earth below. The lush green field was now a massive gathering of disturbed crustiness. Several projectiles tore into two hamlet homes. Nugent Fue wailed at the sight of his loved ones' bodies all torn and curdled. "Why must this madness go on?" he shouted. "God, have mercy on the spirit of the mother of my child. May my child find the peace his naked and torn body deserves." He wept constantly throughout the remaining day. "I shall fight the Kong," he thought. "I shall bury them into the ground." In a village to the north, Tran Wang was working his rice field. Several gunships suddenly appeared over the horizon. They spotted Tran Wang veering back. The ships opened fire. Tran Wang escaped death, his leg slightly wounded. But his two prized water buffalo lay slain. His most sacred possessions were destroyed. "I shall fight the Americans. I will get my revenge," he cried. In the months that passed, Nugent Fue and Tran Wang joined the respective sides of their war for revenge. The hamlet of Bang Sing was under siege, both sides suffering heavy losses. As night approached, the fighting stopped. Strange as it may seem, Nugent Fue and Tran Wang faced each other in the day's battle. A small shanty stood under a palm near the edge of the rice field. Nugent Fue entered it. He carefully unpacked his gear and placed his trusty gun near his side. After an ample dinner of curried rice and smoked fish, he settled down for the night, keeping one eye open for danger. Suddenly, Nugent Fue heard a sound. A shadow shone in the doorway. "Stop, or I will shoot!" Nugent Fue cried. "I have you in my range too," cried the figure. "All right then, come in. Slowly," shouted Nugent Fue. The figure slid cautiously into the doorway. It was Tran Wang. The men faced each other, guns pointed respectfully at the temple. They agreed to lay their weapons aside for the time being. That night, the men were too tired to squabble. They fell asleep. Towards morning, the sounds of the mortar in the distance woke the men up. Now they would meet each other's fate. Suspiciously, Nugent Fue asked Tran Wang why he was fighting. "Those Americans killed my prized buffaloes. I want revenge for the loss," Tran Wang answered. Nugent Fue then told Tran Wang why he was in the war. He was seeking revenge for the death of his wife and son. Both men stared in silence at the ground. Nugent Fue asked Tran Wang if he had any other reasons. Trang Wang replied, I want to work the land. I want my children to grow up healthy and strong. I want to see my grandchildren plump with rice from my field. Nu Jinfue added, I want the peace of my land. I want to worship God in grandeur, not in constant fear. I wanted to see my son grow up to have many healthy children. I want to walk the land in peace. A scrap of paper lay on the shack's floor. Nu Jinfue picked up the paper. On the table, he wrote down his ideas for peace. Trang Wang added his ideas. And they both agreed to take a copy back to each side. Peace will result now that we have aired our views, they thought. Both agreed to give a copy to their respective commanding officers. They stood with their copies of their treaty, smiling at each other. Peace will come now. Nu Jinfue and Trang Wang carefully picked up their guns. They agreed to leave at 1-minute intervals. Both clutched their sacred documents. Nu Jinfue left the shanty first. He slowly circled around the back of it. Then, Trang Wang left the shack. He carefully went around the shanty in the other direction. Trang Wang heard a sound around the exterior wall. He raised his gun and cocked the bolt. Nu Jinfue, on the other side, heard the sound of a gun cocking. He immediately raised his carbine and pumped 3 bullets into the area. God help me, a voice cried. I am dying! I am dying! Nu Jinfue turned the corner and saw to his horror Trang Wang. Trang Wang, in a final burst of energy, raised his gun and fired 1 shot. Nu Jinfue fell gravely wounded. He screamed in agony. At the end, Trang Wang crawled over to Nu Jinfue. The document! God, save the document! Cried Trang Wang. Yes, the document! Please save the document! Screamed Nu Jinfue, clutching the document. And there was silence. Both lay dead. The misty wind separated the sacred papers from the grasping hands of the corpses. They now flew into the sky. Peace had finally come. Peace had finally come. An incredible short piece written by Warren Kantz. Beautifully written, with an abundance of descriptive language. It absolutely moved me when I first read this piece. Brilliant work. Thank you all for tuning in to the Union College Archives podcast. I'm your host, Diana Benenaula, and make sure to follow our podcast for more interesting content and short stories hosted by me and Rachel, and also follow our Instagram at UnionCollege_archives. Again, at UnionCollege_archives. Thanks again to everyone and have an amazing rest of your day.